the property management industry, fair housing offenses are considered especially troubling. In the United States, a dedicated fair housing attorney, Leslie Tucker, provides case explanations and best practices. These are some cases.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fair Housing Insiders Case Files, episode 33, with Leslie Tucker, the principal of Williams, Edelstein, and Tucker, and I'm your host, Jonathan Saar. Welcome back to our channel. We're looking forward to another informative episode today. We are discussing an important fair housing case, United States versus Burlington Preservation Associates, Arbor Management, and Leon N. Weiner and Associates. This case alleges violations of the Fair Housing Act, including discrimination based on race and national origin, as well as retaliation. So as always, we're grateful to have Leslie here as our resident fair housing expert and attorney. Leslie, could you start by giving us an overview of today's case?
Sure. Yeah, Jonathan. So just briefly, this case involves allegations made by the Department of Justice on behalf of a tenant named Roberto. And the case is against the owners and managers of his apartment community in New Jersey. The case does name all entities involved in the ownership or management of that community. Got it.
So what are the specific allegations that were brought about by this case?
The complaint alleges that the defendants discriminated against Roberto, who is Black and Hispanic. He's an Army veteran and a single father. Specifically, it's alleged that the defendants attempted to evict him and change the locks on his apartment during a brief period that he was incarcerated, while at the same time treating a white incarcerated tenant more favorably in a similar situation. Additionally, after Roberto filed a complaint with HUD asserting his rights under the Fair Housing Act, the defendants allegedly retaliated against him by basically failing to recertify him according to the process under the USDA program, as this is a rural development property.
Got it. Oh, that's a lot of allegations. Very concerning. So can we go on a little bit deeper? So what happened during his incarceration?
All right. So in August of 2019, that's how far back this goes, right, Roberto was incarcerated for about 2 months. 4 days after his incarceration began, management began the process of sending notices to his apartment that are required before an eviction can be filed. That's just sort of the process in this state. Mm-hmm. An internal email produced during the lawsuit between two different employees revealed that one of the management employees assumed that Roberto had been found guilty. So they changed the locks to his apartment and filed the eviction with the court. These actions were permissible pursuant to the lease agreement. This was a provision within the lease that allowed eviction upon the incarceration of a tenant. So that's kind of what prompted this whole process. Right. However, notably during this whole period that Roberto was gone from the unit, incarcerated, he did pay his rent in full.
Okay, very interesting. So I'm assuming that they were required to follow the state's eviction procedure. So did that happen? Did they follow proper procedures in notifying him about the eviction?
Well, yes, they are required to follow the state's eviction procedures. According to the complaint, the defendants issued the proper notices. However, they were never actually served on Roberto. They were served to his unit. And he was obviously not there. He was incarcerated, which they knew. So he never received them. He learned about the eviction proceedings through his family members.
Right.
During the period of incarceration, management also allegedly wouldn't permit any of Roberto's family members to access his apartment, even though he had specifically authorized certain individuals, certain family members, to access his unit on the emergency contact form provided by management. So that was another kind of piece of how he felt that he was wronged.
Okay. Very good. So was he evicted? What was the outcome?
Actually, no, he wasn't evicted. He was released from jail, and management later dropped the eviction about a week after he got out of jail. But that certainly wasn't the end of this matter at all.
Right. Because the complaint alleges that a similar situation was handled differently with a white tenant. So what happened there?
Yeah, the complaint alleges that around this same period of time, back in 2019, a white tenant at another property that's managed by the defendants was incarcerated. And actually, he was incarcerated for an extended period of time, multiple years. In that case, management didn't change the locks and they didn't initiate eviction proceedings immediately. They allowed a family member to access the apartment during that time. And instead of filing the eviction, they actually worked with the tenant to arrange a voluntary surrender, where he would kind of voluntarily just send in his keys and transfer possession back to management. And that didn't even happen until 5 months, after he was incarcerated. So eviction was never pursued in that case against that tenant.
Right. So we're seeing completely two different ways of handling the situation. So that's a disparity in how these policies were applied to both individuals, right?
Right. I mean, if the facts are as they are alleged, yes, that is a disparity in how those two individuals were treated. The allegation is that the defendants applied these policies in a discriminatory manner, treating Roberto less favorably than the white tenant, because of his race and ethnicity.
Okay. Interesting. So what happened after Roberto filed his complaint with HUD?
Yeah, so several months after he got out of jail, he did file a fair housing complaint with HUD. And subsequently, it's alleged that the defendants retaliated against him. Specifically, during his annual recertification to recertify his rental subsidy, and this was fast forward to 2024, the defendants allegedly kind of wouldn't allow that process to proceed as it normally would. It's alleged that they kind of disrupted the process by requesting lots of documentation that they had never really asked for in the past. As a result, his subsidy lapsed, it expired, and his rent was converted to market rate, which is, much, much more expensive than what he had been paying under his subsidy.
Okay.
So once he couldn't pay that huge amount of rent, then management subsequently filed a second eviction attempt for non-payment of rent.
Okay. So how can HUD consider this to be a retaliation? His recertification in 2024 was years after the first eviction attempt and his HUD complaint.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. You're right that there does need to be a connection between the HUD complaint in 2020 and the second eviction attempt in 2024 to have some sort of valid retaliation case. And normally in retaliation cases, time itself is usually that connecting element. Although these two events in this case are technically pretty far apart in time, 4 years is a long time. The HUD investigation, however, took years to complete in this specific instance. There was also, in the middle of all those years, another lawsuit that was filed between the parties. So there was all this other stuff going on within those 4 years, active legal claims, investigations between 2020 and 2024. So those two elements can be connected with all of these legal actions and investigations going on.
Got it. Wow, that's a lot of material in this case, a lot to digest. So for our listening audience then, looking at it from their perspective, property management perspective, what are the key takeaways from this case?
So I think there are several kind of important lessons to take. How you apply your policies. Your policies, are more than likely going to be neutral. They're going to be hopefully compliant. But treating two people differently can lead to allegations of discrimination, period. Mm-hmm. Policies and procedures, they need to be applied uniformly to all tenants, regardless of the protected characteristics. And in this instance, protected characteristics may not have even been on someone's mind. But when you look at the two situations with Roberto and then this other white tenant, how do you explain the difference? And that's just going to be up to his lawyers to explain in this case. Secondly, retaliation. Taking adverse actions against a tenant for exercising fair housing rights is illegal.
But
even if a landlord doesn't intend their actions to be retaliatory, it's important to consider whether their action could be perceived that way. And oftentimes it can be if you kind of look at it, from a more objective standpoint. And again, elements that connect those two pieces, if it's timing, if there's sort of a prolonged complaint, that can be the connecting element. So you really need to kind of pay attention to that. And lastly, training and documentation are going to be key for literally any situation. Having your staff trained in fair housing, informed about tenants' rights, how they should handle certain situations, and always maintaining good communication and documentation.
Yeah. Nice takeaways. Good thoughts for everyone to put into best practice for their individual communities and for their company. This case in general, though, it's one that doesn't come up maybe all the time. It's perhaps one of the more rare situations. What's your thoughts on property management and managers handling a situation when a resident is incarcerated?
Well, so managers should have clear policies that comply with fair housing and with their state landlord-tenant laws. And you need to apply them consistently. So if a lease allows for, termination due to someone being incarcerated, it's essential to consider other factors, such as whether the rent is being paid, whether there's other occupants that reside in the unit, and to avoid, certainly avoid discriminatory application of that policy. Whether that type of policy on its face is proper, is one that you may want to talk over with an attorney. But certainly, if you do have a policy like that, applying it consistently is really important.
Yeah. Thank you for the takeaways, Leslie. Appreciate you providing such amazing, valuable insights into this case. And it's a reminder for all of us, the depth of responsibilities, the amount of responsibility that we have as property management professionals when it comes to the Fair Housing Act. So thank you for being available today again.
My pleasure, Jonathan. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. We love you. You guys are a great community. Thank you for your support. And if you found this discussion helpful, please subscribe to our channel, like this video. We are grateful to provide content of this nature to help us all be informed on what's going on in the fair housing and property management world. It's crucial to treat all tenants fairly and lawfully to foster a safe and inclusive housing environment. Until next time, thanks everyone.